graduated from Orange University, which is a military academy. My professor came in, we had finished finals, and he said, "Oh, congratulations." He said, "You now know how to think." And like, what? And he said, "Yep." And he said, "That's all your degree means." He said that what you've gone through the last 4 years just means that you can problem solve and learn how to think. You learn how to think. And we thought we were going to design structures and bridges and do all kinds of stuff. But he was right. That's the best thing to prepare you for the future, because you don't know what's coming down the pike. But if you can think and problem solve, then you can handle it. This brings us to our next presentation. It's Lieutenant Colonel Mike Rounds. And Mike and I go back a little ways. We went to CGSC together. And he's going to talk about operational perspectives from Afghanistan, a little more relevant to some of us. Real quickly, from March 2009 to 2010, Mike was in charge of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Bagram Area Office in Bagram Airfield, Afghanistan. While assigned to Bagram, he supervised over $800 million of construction at the airfield and in 4 of the surrounding provinces around the area in Bagram. So with that, Mike.
Thanks, Jim. Good afternoon, everybody. Everyone awake? I'm currently the deputy commandant at the prep school here in Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, so just came over for the day. But prior to that, I had 2 tours teaching in civil mechanical engineering at West Point, teaching thermal fluids, heat transfer. I was tracking with that. And it was always fun teaching right after lunch, because you could always have to keep my eye on you guys and see if you can stay awake. All right, so I've had a pretty standard career in the Army Corps of Engineers, but spent all my time pretty much as a combat engineer, serving in the 1st Infantry Division, 1st Cavalry Division, and the 101st Airborne Division, where I was a battalion XO on the initial attack into Iraq in 2003. And I could see there how quickly infrastructure could be destroyed by looting people, and how long it took to build some of that back up. And so, of course, I left long before we got to that part of the issue of trying to actually restore what was destroyed. When I first reported to the prep school, about 6 months in, they said, "Hey, we've got a job for you. It's been a couple of years since you're deployed." And long story short, ended up as the OIC of the Bagram Area Office Corps of Engineers. My first assignment in USACE after 22 years in the Army. So it was very much a learning experience for me. And what I have is I got a bunch of slides, but mostly just pictures. I just want to give you a flavor of the kind of stuff that I was thrown into and the kind of infrastructure projects that we were working on there at Bagram and around that area. So next slide, please. There's my agenda, and we'll run through it quick because I know we're on a short timeline. Next. There's Afghanistan. Key point there, it's landlocked. So getting supplies in from anywhere, closest port was Karachi in Pakistan. And so it's not exactly easy area to operate. Next. Just some things about Afghanistan that are pertinent to the situation there. Life expectancy, 44 years old. Literacy rate, 28%. And 36% living before the poverty level. Obviously, you can imagine the challenges there with trying to have competent engineers and construction people that could actually do infrastructure. The country, much different than Iraq, was basically from the Stone Ages. There was really no infrastructure to speak of, other than some areas in Kabul. Next. Just to get an idea, we've broken down the whole country into different regional commands, and I was up there north of Kabul in Bagram. We had the provinces of Bamiyan, Parwan, Kapisa, and Panjshir that we were responsible for projects in. Next. There's Bagram Airfield. Special unique thing about Bagram was it really is the only place in Afghanistan where we have a definite plan to stay. If there's one place we stay in Afghanistan long term, it's going to be Bagram. And so our rules on construction were a lot different than most, and we were building permanent construction projects for the most part there. Next. And that just gives you an idea. That was Bagram, the airfield, and the outside loop of that was 11 miles. We used to run it once in a while. The inner loop was 7.9. So it just gives you an idea, and all the different colors are just different projects that we had going on while I was there. Next. That's our Corps of Engineers area office, and it's one of the, anyone that's been over there has seen the construction. It's basically taking these connexes and putting them together and hooking them up and then having your little air conditioning unit. But we were living pretty good compared to most people there. Next. That's my crew, or 1 month of my crew. And you see a couple people just in regular clothes. We had a couple contractors, a scheduler, and some IT guys. Everybody else was either active duty soldier or a Corps of Engineers, government served GS civilian employee. And I had about a third of my office or less that was actually active duty military, and included a lieutenant, a major, a reservist that was a captain, so a real garden variety of folks. Next. All right, these are just some of the challenges we had at Boswell. Next. We had mines, lots of them, still around even after all these years. Pretty much everywhere we built something, everywhere there was clear mines already had something built on it. So there was no swing space, and we had to continually push efforts to continue to clear more area of mines. Next. And that's kind of one of the ways they did it. It's like a huge snowstorm. Next. One of the projects we were working on when I was there, it was a sewage treatment plant. It's pretty amazing. Right now, on the bases, they come around, they fill water tanks, and they come back and empty tanks that contain either gray or black water. You know the difference, right? Gray, wash your hands. Black, you know the deal. So that's the whole post was continually trucks moving around. So long term, we were doing a project which was three wells that included water treatment plants, running water, running sewer, and sewage treatment that we could pump back out into the creek that went through. So pretty high tech, a big project. Next. And these are just some of the pictures. You can click through these. Guys doing slump tests. This is a Turkish contractor, it's a prime contractor there. So pretty competent individuals, and our biggest challenge was just making sure that our quality assurance guys knew what was going on and could keep track of all these guys. Next. Runways, we did taxiways there. We did a $100 million airfield project that included taxiways and hangars. And we did next concrete, you can see. When it got hot in the summer, started about May, we worked all night. We did it at night because it was too hot during the day to do it. And we had these huge paving machines, so the problem was everything that you brought in had to come in by air pretty much. So it was a real issue. If something broke, we had problems. Next. One of the hangars, C-130 hangar, 2 C-130s would go in there that we're working on. Next. This is part of a fuels project that had 6 million gallon tanks that were buried. And so again, concrete and then covered up, and pump house on top, all connected by a pipeline, and a pumping station to pump fuel out and bring it in also. Next. That's a filter station for one of the fuel projects. Next. And then this one, as a mechanical guy, was one of my favorites. A 30 megawatt power plant we built over there. Did we really build it? Well, we put down the concrete and we brought in the turbines. We had 10 piston rings, which were diesel powered, about 1 megawatt they could generate. And then we brought in these 2 huge solar company turbines from California that were 10 megawatts apiece. They were monstrous. Next. You get a picture. There's the guy, one of the guys, so you get an idea how big that thing is. But one of those alone could generate 10 megawatts. And then in the next fiscal year, we had a plan to expand that and add 2 more 10 megawatts. That would have given us 50 megawatts at Bagram, which is probably far and away more power that's generated in the rest of the country combined. Next. Just another picture of the fuel tanks and the piston rings there. Next. One of the projects I can't show you a whole lot of pictures on, but we did build a 1,200 person prison while we were there. And that was, while the big debate was going on, are we closing Guantanamo Bay, what are we going to do? We had a group that in 18 months built a prison for 1,200, worked round the clock, sometimes had up to well over 1,000 workers on site at a time. 600 some that were third country nationals, and then about 300 to 400 Afghans that we bring to the post every day to work on this. That gives you an example of some of the barracks we were doing. We were doing CMU barracks also, real permanent barracks, but there was a surge going on. This is an RSI area, and so a lot of these containers, you ship stuff over, you got it, what do? You turn them into living quarters. And that's what these guys were doing here. Next. This is a DFAC that was built when I got there in March of '09. They said it was supposed to open that next July. I just got an email in February that it finally opened. It's a little late, about a year and a half late, but The next couple pictures just show you taking through the DFAC. That's the finished product. Before I left, it was getting ready to open, and it could serve 900 people could eat there at a time. It could actually service 1,200 people 3 meals a day, and that was down in the incoming area where they brought the new soldiers in and bought. Next, that's the inside of the DFAC. Next. That was some of the things we did on post at Bagram, obviously focused on life support for the soldiers and airmen there. You know, it's the first time I'd ever served on it was Bagram Army Airfield, but it was mostly an Air Force area. And you learn quickly that the Air Force, they like to be comfortable. And so that stuff's important for them. To me, I was kind of like, really? Okay. All right, next, these are some of our provincial areas where we worked. Go. That was a big challenge. Now we have a pretty small group of soldiers that actually are there as quality assurance people, and it's tough to get where you need to get to. And so we had a program through the Corps. We were trying to train up local nationals to be those quality assurance people with limited success. I mean, there's a lot of very complicated things going on in Afghanistan, and trying to make sure that the reports that we were getting and the progress was going forward as we hear the reports. We had to constantly go check on what was going on. Next. Parwan and Kapisa. Next. This is an example of a police headquarters building that we were building, but you could get an idea now. Look at the formwork. I mean, that's what you saw in Afghanistan all the time. Whatever little piece of little tree or whatever they could find at whatever length would be what they would use to prop stuff up. We went out to the site at one point. They were making their own CMU blocks, so you could drop a block from here and it would just shatter and just sit on top of that. That's not going to work. Next. That's one side, but later we were back. And getting there was fun. That was one of my NCOs, and then we had the those guys from United Arab Emirates, I guess. They had a platoon of guys that ran their MRAPs around, so we jumped in with them and went to a lot of places to go. I just thought this was a funny picture. We're going to inspect, and they, where's your ladder? Bro, here it is. I'm like, well, I'm not going with that. Sergeant Thompson, go ahead. That's what you saw all the time. I mean, there's just literally a real lack of expertise, and that's. Ladders seem to be a real issue for the Afghans. I don't know. All right, thanks. Bombing, that was a place where they blew up the Buddhas. The Kiwis worked there, and they ran the provincial reconstruction team. They were a lot of fun to work with. Next. And that's Lieutenant Booth, one of the lieutenants I worked with. This just shows you a couple of pictures early on when I got there. This was a teacher's college, and this was a building that had, pretty nice classroom building and lab building. Next. So it goes from that, later in the summer to that, to keep going. We were up on the roof, looking at the roof going in, and then the last time we were up there towards the winter time, it was pretty much ready to go. So it was nice to see. Bombing is a peaceful area, so there is a lot of progress going on. Infrastructure and education is a key thing that I think is important here. And so we worked with USAID on this project. They had some of the buildings, the Corps had some of the buildings. Next. This is also in Bombing City. And it just shows they had some curbing going in for a road, so they had some road work that was started there. The Hazaras were really persecuted pretty severely by the Taliban. And the one thing that was neat, I would always bring around pencils. So every time I'd show up, the kids would show up, I'd start handing out pencils and never see kids get so excited about just getting a pencil. And I learned pretty quickly not to have them when there were about 30 of them on me, because that's all I got, sorry. But we give them lots. So this is Bombing City too, and that's what you kind of see. Next picture. You don't see a lot of cars. I mean, this is Bombing City. This is like, this is the progressive part right here.
It's downtown.
Main Street, yeah, right downtown, Bombing City. And that guy carrying with his mule was also coming in there. So it was really interesting to see. Next. Panjshir, another great province to work in. A lot of our projects off base, in addition to the roads, were these Afghan National Police buildings. And we got kind of a cookie cutter design together. And we found that to work pretty well. But again, just different companies, different levels of success. It was always interesting to see, but in Panjshir, again, a relatively peaceful place where we could make a lot of progress. And Kapisa and Parwan, some of those projects, just politically, it just wasn't going well because there was a lot of political issues to deal with. That's just inside that building. We're doing some inspections outside the same building. Next. This I thought was cool. We were driving along, and you see the construction that's the mud huts. This is in Panjshir Valley. The Soviets tried very hard to take Panjshir Valley and never did. And all those are like artillery rounds that they use for the end of their games. They just use them because they're all over the place. There's tanks in the streams and everything, just all shells and stuff. but they're using it for their construction. So that's, and this is what happens when you're making a road and you're trying to work with a contractor and they decide that, well, okay, we're going to widen this road, so they just drop the blade on the dozer and drive through the town and start shearing off buildings left and right. And so that results in, next slide, this, where we have to go down and not talk to all the village elders and they're angry. And so there was a lot of those kind of issues, trying to have suras and trying to figure out what the people want and how to compensate those people that lose things and all that kind of stuff. Next. Okay, how did I do? It was about 10
30 seconds.
That's pretty amazing. Oh, we've got 30 seconds for questions. Yes, sir.
I was just curious about your Portland cement. Like, how did you get the Portland cement in there? Did you ship it in by airplane?
Yep.
Did you buy them?
We tried to do a lot of it. We try to come in by land, but you know, a lot of times they're very unpredictable. Whether stuff would make it in by land from Karachi, and so if you know, the contractor would start getting behind in the schedule and say, listen, you need to start flying this stuff in. You know, you can do it. I know it's expensive.
So you did fly some in? Or?
Mm-hmm. And at Bagram itself, we actually had 5 batch plants that were on the exterior part of the base itself, and they were run by different contractors. And so we made our own concrete right there. And of course, the stuff on the airfield, it was actually pretty, you know, much tighter specs than normal concrete. So it was always a challenge making sure we could get it. We actually took it over the fence with the interior so they didn't have to go through the checkpoints.
Now, did you, for example, were these all coming in like so-called 60-pound bags? I mean,
yeah, most of them were. Yep. Yep. Well, I mean, and that's just the way. Yeah, it's the way it is. Yeah. So.
That's that question. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, considering the critical infrastructure here, how did the indigenous population adapt to this new technology that brought them into the modern world?
Well, you know, a lot of the those kind of things we did on post. You know, we could bring people in, like we were worried about this sewage treatment plant. It was high tech. It was at the top of the line. Who are we going to get to run it? You know, but the biggest things, like out in the provinces. You know, a lot of times we had issues. We'd have generators, for example. We'd have a water tank that would have a pump on it, but they wouldn't want to use any fuel, or they couldn't get fuel, so now a pump didn't work, so they couldn't get water. So then we figured out a way to put them up on stands so they could gravity feed the water, and they wouldn't need pumps. So it is a constant challenge in trying to work with these guys, and that's a big part of it. You build something, but who's going to, once it's finished and you hand it over, is there somebody, you know, some of those Afghan National Police buildings, you know, you'd go back and they'd have their sheep and goats living in there, and, you know, and just like, okay. You know, it's just, but you come to realize, number one, like Nathan was talking about, it's all problem solving. So, you know, there's so many variables involved, and you just have to work with the people and get out and show them that you're trying to do something to help them out. And for the most part, they embrace that. Yes, sir.
You built a lot of infrastructure.
Right.
Were there any incidences when that infrastructure was damaged either by insurgent action or natural causes? And if so, how'd you get it back up and running quickly again?
You know, we didn't really have any major problems on Bagram. We had a lot of artillery coming in, but we never, you know, it was really, it was hit and miss. And they usually sent little rockets on a thing of ice or something, and then drop down and fire in the middle of the night. But they were not ever like attacks on Bagram where they could really target that well. We didn't really have any major problems. And also in the provinces, you know, the areas we were working were fairly peaceful. And most of the time, especially the road, in Kapisa there was a little more contentious, but I think they, you know, even the bad guys recognize that a road can be useful. So, and then honestly, you never really know what's going on out there with the contractor and who he's talking to and who he has to pay off to make sure that he can continue with the process. So it's a very challenging, you know, that's another debate you could have about where are we building these projects and how can we make sure that they're supporting our intent. One of our big intents was the roads. We thought that if we could get roads in, that would increase the commerce, that would make life better, and that would be a good thing in the long run. And so that was a big focus of what we were trying to get in. And not only the Corps, but then the PRTs also had their own projects that we also provided some support for quality assurance and make sure those were being done. Correct. Yes, ma'am.
I saw that the average age was 18. Was that useful in terms of training people to kind of, you know, take part? Or?
Yeah, I mean, we found the Afghans were very hard workers, so if you could get them into a program, that they felt like they could, you know, make a better life for themselves. They worked very hard. The other thing we kind of tied into was Kabul University, and the Corps of Engineers district headquarters is in Kabul, and they had a program to try to get not only from Kabul University but from their military academy, their engineer officers that were graduating and actually learning, and trying to bring them in to help with the Corps of Engineers and doing these real projects, getting them out on job sites. And you know, part of it is we tend to be a little harder on the, you know, U.S. or Turkish firms that were working on base because they had it relatively easy. But these small little Afghan firms that we're trying to build, we try to mentor them a lot more because you don't want a project to fail in that situation. Now you got really angry people and nobody paying them, and so you have to balance how much you're getting done and how much money you're paying with what is the, if we have a failure here, what's going to happen in the long term. So, like I said, very complicated situation. But for you guys, bottom line is you can find yourself in that situation. We had a lieutenant, we had a captain. We had a lieutenant that came in that was a West Point grad civil engineer that got his P, and he went down to Sharana and was in charge of this huge airfield project all by himself. He did a great job too. So, and that's what you kind of just got to go out there and think, right? Okay, I'm getting the hook.